to Quick and Early Miracles, week 3 of 5. Maybe more, maybe less, depending on how I'm inspired. So, if you don't know, I'm coming out here 5 days a week, per week, to make space to talk about whatever you want to talk about, or whatever comes to me to talk about. So, what came to me to talk about today, barring any suggestions from the crowd, is how you constrain the possibilities of your moment. So I just made this up right now, but it summarizes what I found in working, in this space with myself and others for some time. So the circle is your moment. Your moment is this beautiful orb that you have at any given time, and you own your moment. That means that there ain't shit in your moment from the past, from what other people think or feel, what anybody else is doing, what else you might be doing in your moment, except for what you bring through your choice of focus. This, to me, is self-love. You recognize that this moment is your personal experience and you own it. And that means that if it makes your moment feel smaller or sadder, to consider the mistakes that you've made or what you don't have or that thing that somebody said. If you want to bring those things into your moment and make it smaller, you can. But you also have the choice to keep the moment open. And I talk a lot in the I Am Radio series about how what you think you're doing when you're not allowing your moment to be pure through the analysis of other things isn't really what you're doing. It's real cute, and it blew my mind several times over to see that all of the really sincere analysis and forecasting and figuring I was doing at a personal level and at a universal level, while it had some value, it really was taking away from my end state goal of doing it, which would be to enjoy my life freely as myself, to be, an expression of creative life force, and to be in flow or at one with what is. If you're up here, you're really not with life. You're separated from life. And that, I also talk about that a lot in those broadcasts, which are available on I Am Radio. Reverse that. They're on youtube.com/The Shaylee Show, and they're also available on IGTV. But separation is essentially when you say there's something that's not you. And depending where you are on your path, that might make a lot of sense and that might not make any sense. And you can explore that idea in several ways. And one way is to allow that humanity, the universe, the globe, all the stuff that is part of a closed system, just like, my toes and my teeth are different parts of my body, and yet they are the body, and the body is them. So similarly, we have this experience of everything, and while the toes and the teeth are separate, they're not. So that's one way to explore oneness. The other is, really the relationship you have with your personal experience. So when you're taking in information or you're perceiving things in the world around you, you're perceiving them in a very personal way. And it is similar enough generally with the world around you that you might not notice how personal your experience is. And that means that what stands out to you, how you describe it, where you think it fits, is likely very different than other people, even people that seem like they're thinking and talking about the same things. So the oneness there implies that while your experience of the external world is separate, it's still just kind of an expression of your own belief system, your own expectation, your own identity. So, in how you constrain your moment, and if anybody's watching this on the playback, please let me know. I don't want to be redundant or repetitive, and I know I touch on that topic generally before I go on to something that's related to it. But if you already know and you're over it, you can say that. So, you constrain your moment with I have the past, all, me, future. And what occurred to me in drawing this out is that the future and all are really just distorted expressions of your ideas from the past and yourself. So when you're contemplating what other people might be thinking or feeling or experiencing or doing, you're contemplating it through the lens of your own personal experience. And you're sort of saying like, it's like you think that what they think about would be what you think about. And while there might be some overlap there, you really can't anticipate how or why someone feels. And if you haven't looked at human design before, it is an incredible tool. It's so great, particularly in underlying the differences we have as people, because one of the primary characteristics that human design points out about a person is their type. And there are 5 different types, and I think of them kind of like dog breeds, where, the golden retriever has these attributes in general, and there's range within the breed, and the chihuahua these, and, the beagle these. So each type has different access to life force, and some more than others, and some can guide life force towards new creations that they brought into being without any, just purely, and others can only respond to those things and that are. And all of that's to say, if you are one type, you cannot imagine the experience of the other, because it's just fundamentally different than your own. And so when we're thinking about other people and what they're doing or what they're not doing, we're usually thinking but if it was me. So you're comparing who you are, what you do, or what they are and what they do to you, when they could be very different things. So we can constrain our moment based on the ideas of what other people are doing, because then you can apply judgment on what you're doing naturally. So another way to think about yourself as an individual is kind of like a plant. And the plant will grow up, around, through, different things, and it needs it may need specific environmental things to thrive, etc. But the plant has its own intelligence, and it's just going to grow. Whereas we come into the plant growing, we come and witness the growth and think how is this happening? How can I control this? A while ago, I posted a video clip from the beginning of the movie Mr. Nobody, which is a real interesting movie. And at the beginning, they have this video montage of pigeons, and the narrator says how pigeons are trained, and that if a pigeon is doing something when a treat is released, the pigeon then thinks oh, this made the treat release. And so the pigeon will keep doing that to try to get the treat. And it's the same thing with humans. We have this plant that's growing naturally of its own intelligence, and then we witness it and think what was I doing to make that happen? Or what was I doing so I don't make that happen? And sure, being in the business of habits, which are repeated patterns or repeated choices, I can say you can generate environments that will yield certain results. You can influence what you're doing through those things, but it's not at the level that you would initially think, and certainly not the one that I did. It's not so much what you do, but why you do it, what you believe to be true while you're doing it. That's how people can generate such different results through different activities, because their beliefs are different. So you can have somebody who believes that all they need to do to be fit and healthy is swim in the ocean once a week, and maybe they'll be ripped and fit. And somebody else might believe that they need to spend 5 hours in the gym every week to achieve that same result, and that will be their truth. And yes, there are still things like patterns and harmony and it's seemingly things that are vibrationally different. And yet it does, underneath all of it, is sort of what is the belief that you have in what you're doing and what it will yield. So that's to say, when we're in our moment, we might constrain the choice that we would make or the life that would come through us relative to what we think other people are doing. That's not how it looks. If I want that, it should be this. What will they say about this? And so rather than allow life to move naturally through us, we're like, but no, not there, because similarly, we take the past and push it onto the future. And I'll emphasize, the past that you use is not the past that there is. The past that you use, similar to what I'm saying about personal experience, is very personal. What you think to remember, how you remember it, why it matters, the meaning that you attach to it. It seems almost like you have a book and you're like, oh, this, let me consult my personal history, let me consult my memory in the past. But this book, you're basically rewriting all the time based on what's new now, and you're not consciously doing it, it's just happening. And it's almost too like while you were writing it down in the first place, you had one eye closed, so what actually is in the book of the past, your past and everybody's past, is not really what was. And even if it was, the future need not be constrained by that, and it never has been or never will be. So when you're in your moment, it's allowing that what you don't know can be, and there is some faith and trust in that. And you will try to say, it's almost like, well, I know I want to have a business, and so I need to have a website, and so I should be sitting at home working on my website if I want to have this thing. That would be the past projected onto an inspiration such as serve, independently. And yet, perhaps, if what you really want to do that day is go to the park, maybe there'd be a conversation with somebody who you could partner with, and you really don't know how things will unfold, but because of this very sure past you carry around with you, you think that you do. And so you take what you would do naturally in your moment and you hold it in there too. So if you're just joining, I'm talking about how ideas of yourself and the past constrain the choices or the natural expression of the moment. And I think of, like I was saying, kind of like our lives or ourselves as these plants that have their own intelligence, their own natural inclination towards growth and what they need in this really intelligent, self-contained system. And then our minds come along and they separate from the intelligence of the plant and say okay, well, if you want to do that, here's what you need. And the mind, which could not possibly comprehend all of the intelligence of the world, starts to try to guide or control the development of the plant, which would happen naturally. And so it's not to say that you don't reflect. It's not to say that you aren't curious. It does seem that in some ways it is helpful to go through a period of time where you're clearing out or you're re-relating to your mind so you know what's yours and what's somebody else's. For example, you might have a very convincing voice inside that's highly critical of what you're doing and who you are. That's not actually you. It might just be the voice of your grandmother or your parent or somebody that was really just all the time talking about how other people weren't good enough. They weren't saying you weren't good enough. They weren't saying they weren't good enough. They were just commenting on the world around, and so you picked up that template of dialogue and you apply it to anything that you think about. So you could be applying it to yourself, you can be applying it to the world outside of you. And it sounds like you. It really sounds like you, because the voices inside take on your voice generally, or what you think would be your voice. And so it does seem helpful to have a period of time where you're asking, is this a voice that's helpful? Is this a perspective that empowers me? Is this adding to my life? Is this adding to my confidence? What role is that actually playing? And with something like criticism, it's really not that helpful. Gene Keys is another system I absolutely love, and he talks about the difference between judgment and discernment. And it's when you take judgment as saying this book is better than this book because. Discernment is saying these books are different and acknowledging that you can't really know the role that this book would play. perhaps this book is a flop when it's published, and yet 30 years from now it has a really important role in a revolution or something. And so you don't really know if something is good or bad. In the moment, you can only say, like, these are its features, and you can't really rank it. And with these comparative ideas that we use to constrain our moment, there's a lot of ranking, there's a lot of judgment. And it is helpful, I think, to really explore when you're doing that, what are you accomplishing, and is it what you think you're doing? And all of that is to say, like, so how do you unbox your moment? How do you unconstrain your moment? How do you free yourself of the past and the ideas of yourself? I came up with this question: what if? So usually when we're using this what if, we use it based on those ideas, the past and the me ideas we don't really want. What if this goes wrong? What if I won't get what I want? What if? And some of them are very clear. What if I don't get paid? Some of them are a little subtle and more in the background. What if my life won't have meaning? What if I won't be good enough for love? Those aren't questions you usually hear, but they're questions that influence everything else that you do. But what if you use the what if question on the upside? So what if things went right? What if it was possible to move in that direction? What if you were met with support? What if it was surprisingly easy? What if what you wanted came as you needed it? What if? So again, like, this question is already in play in the experience of the moment, but it's just kind of clouded by these things that we think are real but aren't. And so the way to break yourself free would to be play around with this question. And it takes a little practice to think kind of like in the creative positive if you haven't before, because so much of our training is not that. And some of that training is like external, and some of that training is just like the brain wants to survive and it thinks to do this. So does anybody do you have any questions before I close for today? The last thing I will say is, what's the last thing I'll say? I'd say, so in coming out and talking to this material, one of my things that one of the things that constrains me in this process is the idea that everyone has access to this information. It's like, it's true. There's nothing I'm saying here that you don't know on some level or you couldn't get to yourself. And yet I still find when I interact with material of people who are talking on similar topics, it's helpful to me to remember in the noise of life that this is what's happening and this is what can be. Still, it's important. It would be super helpful to me if you've watched this or any of my other work to let me know what is helpful to you, how it's helpful to you, what you would like to see, just so that I can kind of help my mind let go of the idea that that I don't have, that it's okay that I'm doing this and that it has a place. All right, thanks so much for coming today, everyone. Have a great day.